So it's my great honor to also introduce Dr. Dr. Christine Cole Johnson, who is the chair of the Department of Public Health Sciences in the Henry Ford Medical Group, a component of the Henry Ford Health System. She has been studying health and working towards finding ways to prevent and treat health problems for more than 30 years and has published 230 articles. Her current research focuses on the environment and allergies and the immune system development in children. I'd like to present Dr. Christine Cole Johnson. Yep, feel free to grab that.
I like to use my hands. Okay. So I forgot to put, I was born at Henry Ford Hospital, so that's my best credential. And I also want to personally thank any veterans in the room for their protection in our country. So I'm really here to tell you moms and grandmothers and aunts out there that all this guilt we've been feeling about not having a really clean, tidy house, we don't have to feel that anymore. It's great. And we don't even have to worry that we took our kids to daycare, because that was a great thing too. I've been working on, first I want to stress that we have to really be careful, and a lot of times doctors and nurses and researchers and everyone else mixes up the factors that cause a disease and the factors that cause a disease to be worse, all right? So the things that might cause asthma to flare up may not be the same things, in fact aren't, the same things that cause the disease to occur in the first place. So we're really interested in my group. We're trying to figure out what causes the disease in the first place so that we can actually get rid of the disease, and then actually, Kathleen's going to be out of a job, sorry, because she's not going to have to educate people how to manage the condition. What we're finding out is it seems to be that really early life is extraordinarily important. Not only a little baby, a newborn, but even the prenatal period, so exposures that the mother has seem to be where it's at, what's really important. The way we study this is that we actually do research where we call them birth cohorts. And we enroll mothers who are expecting babies, and then when the baby's born, we keep following the families, and we collect all kinds of samples, environmental samples, biological samples, and we also collect information from the families to try to figure out what in the environment and what social things and what behaviors put a baby at higher risk or lower risk for a disease. They did an inventory about a year or so ago, and there's about 40 of these birth cohorts going on in the US right now, and quite a few in other countries. And I'm involved with 3 in Detroit, actually. The first one that I worked on was in the 1980s when I first started my job, and we thought at the time that the biggest exposure, the most important exposure, was allergen exposure. So dust mites, cockroaches, mice, dogs and cats. Exposures very early. The more you got exposed, the more likely you were to get allergies and asthma. But then around the last part of that decade, the end of 1989 actually, a guy from Britain named David Strachan published a paper, and he found that the families in Britain, the youngest kids were least likely to have allergies. So the more kids you had older than you, the less likely you were to have the conditions. The oldest kid was at the highest risk. So this developed into what they called, and he used these words in his article, the hygiene hypothesis. So as Dr. Blessman mentioned, a lot of things have changed over time related to hygiene. Some of them are, I have a list here, we have smaller families, we have an increased standard of living, our water's been cleaned up, we have less exposure to animals, farm animals, other animals. Kids don't play outside as much, they spend almost all their time inside. And then medical things have changed. We do a lot more C-sections, 30% of births are C-sections now, and that's been pretty steady. We use a lot more antibiotics, sometimes when we really may not need to, in little kids. So, there were some studies done in Europe where they looked at families where, mostly in like Austria and Germany and Switzerland, where they have really small farms and the cattle are basically almost next door to the kitchen. They're almost like Amish farms are here. And they found these kids don't have any asthma at all. They don't have allergies. So that's interesting. So then our first cohort, where we were looking at all these allergen exposures, because we thought that more allergen, more disease, and we found out it was just the opposite. The higher the allergen level in the first year, the less the kid had the disease. So one of the papers we published showed that if you had a dog or cat in the house, in fact, the more you had, in the first year of life, or when the mother was expecting the baby, the kid was less likely to be allergic. And this was a stunner. And then it's been repeated by a lot of people, so it wasn't just a fluke. Then along the way, in fact, in about 2007, a new technology developed. And this technology allows scientists to measure all bacteria known to man in any kind of specimen. You can use water, you can use air, you can use blood, you can use poop. Well, that came out funny. But anyway, so before that, you couldn't measure bacteria that well because a lot of the bacteria, if they're exposed to oxygen, they die. And you can't measure it. So studies that were looking at bacteria, because you'd think bacteria is related to hygiene, right? They could only culture 7 kinds of bacteria. Well, there's 8,000 kinds of bacteria on a human body. What's 7 going to tell you? I mean, one of the ones we measure is E. coli, right? But that's one. So this technology came along and everybody started getting interested in bacteria. There was a gigantic project called the NIEHS Microbiome Project, in which they took like 200 and some people and measured the normal bacteria on human beings. So here you are, you see me standing here with my scarf and earrings, and I have 10 times as many bacteria on me right now, kind of gross. 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells. And guess what? All you guys do. We're called superorganisms. We are loaded with bacteria. And you can't call the bacteria parasites or even commensals. We're really mutualistic. And we call ourselves that because the bacteria benefit us and we benefit the bacteria. We can't survive without them. They can't survive without us. Turns out they're really important. And what I'm going to talk about is the gut microbiome in our intestine, which is where most of them, the big majority, live. But there's also skin bacteria. There's all kinds of bacteria right there. And also in the lungs. But we study gut, so that's what I'm going to talk about. The gut bacteria do a lot of things for us. They help digest our food. They produce vitamins. They produce important metabolites that we have to survive. They protect the lining of the gut so that bad bacteria and pathogens don't invade. But the most interesting thing is the bacteria in the gut are very important for the immune system. I didn't know this until I started studying this, but the biggest immune organ in the human body is the GI tract. I didn't know that. And when a baby is born, when they're in utero, it's a pretty sterile situation, although there's probably bacteria there too, they're finding out. But when the baby is born in the first months of life and year of life, they're exposed to an onslaught of bacteria. All of a sudden, sterile baby, bacteria everywhere. And this is how the immune system learns, it gets educated. So here it is, it's immature, hasn't been exposed to anything, and it gets all this bacterial exposure, and it stimulates the immune system and teaches the immune system how to react, and also how to be balanced, and how to tamp down reactions and stop them. So you want to develop an immune system that's balanced, right? So this particular kind of bacteria accumulation in the baby's GI tract promotes that balance. So what we did was we started a study, and one of the things that you guys could do to help when people are, your friends and your relatives are asked to be in these kinds of studies, we hope to start another one with Cures and some people at University of Michigan in the near future. It would really help if you'd say, you know what, you should do it. Because this is the only way we find out about this stuff. But we had a study called WHEELS. It was in Detroit and in Western Wayne County, where we collected stool samples from babies, from their diapers. And we followed them, and now they're turning 10 years of age. So we put those in the freezer. I don't know what made me store them, but I'm glad I did. We're using that technology to measure the bacteria in the stool samples of these kids, and now we know if they're allergic or if they have asthma or not. One thing that we're finding out is, first of all, babies eat a lot of dust. They eat enough to ingest about 70,000 to 1 million bacteria a day. You've seen that with babies. So they definitely get exposed to the house dust. So we also have house dust, which we're measuring. It turns out with the baby stool samples that a lot of the things that we think are related to asthma and allergy are related to the patterns of the ecology of the baby's gut microbiome. So if there's a pet in the house, that kid's microbiome looks different. If there's a C-section, it looks different. If the mother's breastfeeding, it looks different. If the mother gives the baby water very early, it looks different. Environmental tobacco smoke affects that baby's microbiome. So all these things that we've been thinking about might be related. Maybe they're related, we think, by affecting the child's microbiome. The other thing that we just found out, we have a paper that we just submitted to a medical journal. We can classify the babies in this study to have 3 major types of microbiome. And it's like 3 different ecologies. And one of them seems to be associated with increased risk of allergy and asthma. So, we're narrowing things down. So these are the things that we have found that affect the baby's gut microbiome. Pets, C-section, breastfeeding, diet, environmental tobacco smoke, birth order, remember that birth order thing? Income and education. So what do I think is going on? I think that maybe in urban areas, we have systematically removed these bacterial exposures that kids need to develop a balanced immune system. And one friend of mine from University of Wisconsin calls cities microbial deserts. And maybe that's what we need to work on. So I think with that, I can give you a few tips, by the way. There's, oddly enough, some studies coming out that show that using a dishwasher, people that use a dishwasher, they're more likely to have asthma in their family. Probably because dishwashers sterilize dishes, right? A study out of Scandinavia showed that mothers that clean the pacifier by sticking it in their mouth, their kids less likely to have allergy. We don't have to feel guilty about anything. But anyway, so are there any questions? Were we going to have a little question and answer? We're kind of running out of time, but I think that's it. Happy to take questions. Yeah. We did measure stress, and we used some instruments to look at that. I don't think, Kyra's in the audience, I don't think we've looked at that one yet. We haven't looked at that variable yet, but we will. Trying to think, I don't think we did. We're still doing analyses, so.
And one other quick question. I heard that there's a relationship between obesity and asthma, and if you could just say a word about that.
Yeah. So again, thinking about what causes disease and what causes a disease to get worse. I think obesity plays a role in both. So obesity definitely seems to be related to increasing asthma exacerbations. But it's also definitely true that obesity and overweight affects a microbiome. So it might be affecting the mother's microbiome. And then that is going to affect what her baby's exposed to. They're showing now, it's remarkable work, that people who smoke, adults, have a different microbiome than non-smokers. People that are overweight have a different microbiome. So it may not be just what you eat and physical activity. Your microbiome might be helping screw you up. So, yes?
Hi, this question, the kid in me wants to ask this question. I've noticed that I never sneeze when I'm sleeping. It seems like we wake up and then the allergies hit us and then we begin sneezing. Does anyone know why that is? You ever notice that? We don't, like, why aren't we sneezing from allergies when we're sleeping?
I'm not sure, but I think there's a lot of circadian rhythms that have to do with our biology goes very different over the day. Some people have nocturnal asthma, and actually that's pretty much usually when people have that, it's really severe. So that's something that doctors look out for and worry about when kids have that at night or wake up with asthma. But I don't think I can really answer your question except for circadian rhythms. Anything else? Okay, thanks.
Oh, hold on one second. We'll see, do we have any other questions for Christine or any of our other speakers? Give you guys a quick 5 minutes to come up, answer any more questions from the crowd.
I wasn't going to ask this, but since you have a quick 5 minutes, I'm curious. I understand that there may be a relationship to asthma and respiratory problems based on where people live. For instance, the close proximity to freeways and highways. And I wonder if anyone has looked at that and in that addressed sort of urban planning and the things related.
There's definitely been studies that show, they call it traffic-related air pollution. A lot of work actually in Europe on that. And it seems to be especially associated with exacerbation. So if you live close to freeways and you have the condition, it can get worse. There's actually, truthfully, less evidence that pollution causes asthma in the first place. It's more about causing exacerbations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that particular piece because remember I mentioned that asthma seemed to go up in developed countries at the same time, everywhere. I don't know that I can really ascribe that to changes in the environment in terms of outdoor exposures everywhere at the same time. And I'm really more suspicious for nutritional practices as a cause, not necessarily an exacerbation per se, because anything that can act as an irritant can exacerbate it once you have the particular problem. But I am very concerned for both indoor exposures and kind of dietary, kind of other things. That's why I said we really need to get to a place where we're very aware of what we're doing and how we are being exposed and the relationship between that and our symptoms. And of course, whenever there are studies of this nature that try to make that association or characterize that, we need your participation, because that's how we learn. Other questions? I should have put down my mic before I asked that question.
This is a comment as opposed to a question. So I learned on Friday through an event the Ecology Center had that the quality of our soil is a huge problem. The microbiome or the micronutrients in our soil are so depleted, and if we can improve like the soil, not just the soil that food grows in, but it can sequester carbon, and so that was something like that just was brand new to me, which could affect, you know, the nutrient density of the foods that we're eating, and I think it also could affect the air quality that, you know, we're exposed to.
Just real quick, Dr. Blessman, it's Dr. Blessman, right? The issue around food and people's nutrition levels, are you familiar at all with the term food deserts, particularly where African Americans live? There seems to be limited access to quality foods, and I'm wondering if in your research, have you considered that in terms of access to nutrition and individual behavior?
I mean, yes, there's clearly a relation. Well, I should say clearly a relationship, but we do have some concerns about the quality of food and its availability, particularly for fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables within the inner city. And there are efforts to try to address that in some manner. But I'd still say, though, well, I'll put it this way. Part of our success will come from understanding, allowing people who have survived and have thrived in different environments, you know, how do you do it? You know, how do they spend their day that others in the same environment, how does it differ from those? Because we do have success stories, and so often we have focused on the ill and kind of ignored the individuals who have done well. And we need to have a platform for them to share their testimony as well so that we can learn, because oftentimes people want to come in and say, oh, well, this is what you need to do, you know, try and come in with a solution, when the solution oftentimes is actually in the community itself. And I think we need to do better at fleshing out those answers. Other questions? Well, I think I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to close us out, who is the man,
All right.
the legend, with the Barry White voice.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you all for coming out. Hope everybody took something away from this and, you know, can help to better our lives, especially in dealing with allergies, asthma. I ask that on your way out, in your package, you received a survey. It's just one page. Please turn this in on your way out, and we will trade you this for a free lunch. The great people over at Russell Street Deli have catered this meal, and their sandwiches are awesome if you have not been down to Eastern Market to check them out. Also, there's a small card in your packet as well. If you would like to get more information on what we're doing here at Cures, I send out an emailer. We have a newsletter coming out, as well as several social media, Facebook, YouTube, all of that information. And if you want information on more events, please fill out this card. Also, one of my jobs as the community outreach coordinator is to continue to share the information that we've received here, because of course, Christine, Kathleen, and James are very busy, and I can usually get out into the city faster than they can in some cases. So if you have a block club, if you have a community group, a small group, a school, parent organization, any kind of organization, and you want to share this information with them, please let me know. by checking the box on this card here. I will also be giving out my contact information if anybody needs it. And, you know, feel free to ask any other questions of our speakers on your way out while we're kind of sitting here convening. Everybody, enjoy your Wednesday, your Veterans Day, and enjoy your week. Thank you.